Welcome back to Gig Harbor Paddling. Today we are doing kayak video review. We noticed a lot of our kayakers are exiting late, so we have addressed that during our video review to avoid this problem in the future.
Most important thing a part of your kayak stroke is your exit. I believe that your exit leads in, it sets you up for a good setup, and a good setup will lead to a strong catch. But if there's something wrong with your catch, if you bend your bottom arm, if it's too late, it'll lead you into an exit that is not properly positioned, and it will not let you get to a proper setup, and it will set you up for failure throughout the rest of your stroke. Terms of vocab I will be using in this that I want to go over first. So there is concentric, isometric, and eccentric contractions. Throughout your stroke, you go through all of these, but concentric is like constricting, so almost like a bicep curl, right? Isometric is where your arm stays still. There's no change in length, but there still is resistance against it. So an example of that would be like holding a pull-up at the top of the bar. That's a way of training isometric movements. Or squat holds. So bottom of your squat, you're holding the weight. And then eccentric would be like going up on a squat. Like, so as you squat down, everything's constricting, and then eccentric would be on your way up. Or on a pull-up would be like pull-ups let down. So you're concentric, you pull up, and then holding would be isometric, and then letting down slowly would be eccentric. And these are all good terms to know when looking at a kayak stroke. Something that I noticed yesterday in yesterday's workout, it was 15 minutes of paddling, and then at zone 3, and it should be pretty technical. And then it was 3 minutes at zone 1, and there's this thing I like to call lazy technique. You guys were putting in the effort, and like the drive was there, but the technique was not. So, and this is with everybody. During these, just because you're at either a zone 3 or a zone 1, you should still be explosive and quick through the water, and not kind of just dragging your water through the paddle every stroke. It's like, yes, your heart rate might be at what zone 3 requires, but your technique won't quite be there. Right now, a lot of it, as I've been noticing on the water, is everyone's just kind of paddling through, and there's not a lot of power at the catch, and then straight into a glide, even at zone 1. It should be hard. It's not easy to do, but everybody is just kind of paddling along, and they're just kind of going. Like there's not much intention to the stroke, which leads to a lot of bad habits, especially in your exit. It leads to a really late exit, since there's not a strong catch to get your exit out early and on time. A good example I would like to bring up is Danielle's. As Danielle is paddling, she has a nice glide. There's lots of power. So that would be a more intentional stroke, right? Every stroke, I can see there's a lot more intention to it. There's a lot of glide. There could be more, and there's other things to work on, but it's a good starting example. Ben Waters, same thing. I think there could be a lot more power. But the glide you are holding in the air is helping. Your exit is still quite significantly late, and we'll get there. But by intentionally paddling, Ben and Danielle, but everybody, but if you guys were to have a even harder catch, even at that zone 3, zone 1, you would be able to significantly improve your stroke with a proper exit leading into a proper top hand driving through. Connor Kitching stroke, right? So with his exit, if you're watching, you can see, so he's bending his bottom arm right away. You can see it's bent, and then his top arm's shooting up, and because of that, because his top arm's shooting up and down and out, that exit's continuing. He should be starting to get out of the water right here, but his paddle's still not out of the water, still not out, still not out, still not out. It's out of the water right here, and his top arm is already straight, and he's exited all the way back at his number holder. So you're at your setup, and then you go down to your catch, and you rotate, and when you're about here, you're about at your hips, and then you should be going for your exit. Your shoulders can rotate a little bit more, even though your legs are fully rotated. And then as you're exiting, your paddle comes out flat like this. If you're exiting late, right, you're driving down too far, a lot of you, or you're pulling, then your paddle comes out flat like a scoop like this, and which will bring a lot of water up. But also with that late of an exit, it's going to bring your arm up like this, or people will like to kind of swing it around, and then their top arm will immediately go down to their catch. And then with those concentric and eccentric movements, right, this top arm's isometric. All right, it's fighting against the power in the water. It shouldn't be moving up or down. So there's a lot less power up here. So as Connor's driving into the water, his arm shoots up, which leads to an immediately negative stroke. And like by the time he's fully buried, and him being forced to bend this bottom arm in order to continue throughout the stroke. And then as he drives down, it'll lead to another late exit. Over here, you can see that happening. That top arm's being forced to shoot up. He's buried right about his knees, and that top arm's already shooting out. There could be a lot more power held. His exits all the way back by his number holder by the time he's out of the water. If he was able to get that catch, keep this top arm here with a lot more powerful catch, you'll be able to exit on time, which will lead into a nice setup, right? So you can have those powerful catches. Otherwise, that top arm will, it's weak out here. It's kind of doing like a lateral raise versus a bench press, right? You can bench press a lot more than if you have weight all the way out here. So same thing in the water. If your arm's right here, you can put a lot more power into the water than you can if your arm's either up here or out. There's a couple of things to work on, but I did like the placement of her catch, or not of her catch, of her exit. So if you're looking here, she's starting to exit already, and she's out of the water pretty much right at her hips. Her elbow's not too far behind her. Her top arm straight as her paddle's out of the water, and it leads into a nice setup. She is newer to a racing kayak, so she is kind of rushing into that stroke. She could hold that setup for quite a bit longer, but that bottom arm stays straight up until paddle starts breaking neutral into the negative, but once that happens, she immediately begins to exit. Braking at the bottom arm so here's another example. And then same issue with Connor, still shooting that top arm up a little higher. So at his catch right here, right, that top arm shoots up. He's fully buried here, but his arm's already bent. And then continuing driving, that top arm kind of forces that paddle into such a negative where that paddle then brings up so much water on his exit and then puts his back arm in a bad position for his setup to lead through the rest of his stroke. So now same thing. So later exit, it's kind of right out behind him, and then which is kind of forcing his arm to go up here. And as he's paddling, right, it's not out in front of him. It's out here to the side. It's now driving down up here, which is a lot less power, which is also going to lead to a very, very wide stroke, not so vertical, so his paddle's outside of his boat instead of up front tracking along his boat, and it's going to go out to the side towards the end, towards your exit, but it shouldn't. His is starting quite a distance away from his boat. That top arm goes up here and then drives up and out away from his boat into the water, and then he's fully buried at his knees, even though it would be nice if he was starting to get almost fully buried about up here, and then with a later exit here. So that exit kind of involves with everything in your stroke, in my opinion. I think it sets you up for everything you can need, because if your exit's on time, right, and if your exit's on time, it'll bring you up to a nice setup. If your setup's low, it's just as simple as just bringing that top arm up, there's not that much adjustment there. You know, with that nice exit, it'll set you up into a nice setup. And if you're stable enough, you can hold that glide. And it'll also set you up to a very nice catch where you can simply drop this bottom arm down without shooting this top arm up because you're not in a weaker position out here. So you can have this arm right here, which is a lot stronger, and dropping down to the catch and then starting to rotate, right? And then without breaking this bottom arm, then you can lead yourself into the nice exit, which sets you up for everything. A visual cue I liked when I was learning on exits was you should be able to see both your hands the whole time. They shouldn't go out of your field of view. This hand will be close to out, or your exiting hand will be close, but it won't. You shouldn't not be able to see it. As you're driving, a big thing to that is rotating. So, because once you're fully rotated, and you're starting that exit, which is just simply lifting this top arm up as this arm goes straight. There's like just from here, I can see my hands the whole time. Whereas if you're driving this top arm down or shooting or pulling. From here I'm pulling, it's like I can't see my arm back here if I'm looking forward down the course, and or if I'm driving too far, this hand goes out of sight. Also with exiting, we say exit at the hip, and then a big issue with that is people exit when their hand is at the hip because they know their hand's at the hip because you can't feel where your blade's at nearly as well because your hand's a part of you. Your hand is almost going to be at like mid-thigh because if you look at Ethan, his blade is right now at his hip and his hand's at his mid-thigh. So it's like it'll feel too early. It'll feel like your hand's at your mid-thigh, but that's exactly when you should really start getting it out, or it should be in that process of coming out of the water. So I pointed out earlier, I like Danielle's power per stroke. There's a lot of power, there's a lot of glide. Her rotation's really good. You can see her torso's rotated slightly further than her legs up into her setup. You can see the back of her life jacket right here. You can see that her hips are following that leg drive, and it's very connected between her legs all the way up to her shoulders. But that top arm is shooting out too early. It should be holding steady as you drop down to your catch. She does keep it at a decent height, but that top arm driving down is leading to a later exit, and her paddle's just out of the water right here, which is behind her, almost at the number holder. And then as she brings it up, her elbow's already behind her, so your back arm should be almost like a 45-degree angle here, and then a 90-degree from your bicep to your forearm. With that arm being behind, it can also lead to shoulder injuries, which is not good. And then you can see the same thing on this side. That top arm kind of shoots out a little bit. Actually, that one was actually pretty good. Her top arm actually does stay in on the right, and she's driving it through the water, keeping that top end bent and in, and then still exiting late. There is nice top arm placement from that, at least on the right side. A couple big things is like that helped me with getting my exit early and on time would be a super strong catch and being very powerful through the water. With that, it helps you get your paddle out of the water quicker and easier. If you kind of just plant your paddle and rotate and kind of just drag, it's going to be harder. Your paddle's not going to be moving through the water. It's going to come out late. You're going to be scooping water in the back end. And there's also a lot of burnout that could happen from that too. Immediately with Dylan's exiting, pulling back on the exit, following with his elbow, and then his paddle's out of the water behind him. And then as he goes down, he kind of evens out. So kind of both arms are straight here, burying into the water. And then that top arm, again, is super high. There's a loss of power there. And then as he drives through the water, because it's so up and high, it's driving that paddle down too far and then it back into a late exit. His rotation is very nice. Same thing. You can see the back of his life jacket. He's rotated quite far, getting ready for a very nice lengthened out catch. Because that top arm comes up, that catch isn't nearly as efficient as it could be, since by the time he's buried, he's already vertical, at least in his stroke. And then throughout his stroke, same thing. He's vertical, and then he's rotating through, and he wants to get a full stroke in, at least the feeling of a full stroke, which will then to pulling in the back arm and exiting late. And this is everybody. I know there's only certain videos, but this is everybody's doing the same thing. Top arm shooting up. This arm isn't staying, and it's an isometric movement, right? It's fighting against the resistance of the paddle. So it's not just sitting here, it's fighting against the resistance paddle to stay on a track with your eye level. Coach Allison would use the example if there was like a rail around your shoulders, that top arm would follow along it. It's not leaving. It's not going off the rails. Very, very late exit. I think it would significantly improve setups and catches, and it will also help improve boat speeds as you are able to get your catch out in front of you and properly buried on time instead of buried by the time it's vertical. For keeping at your eyesight, I've never actually done a drill for that. A big problem with people not keeping at their eyesight or dipping it low is their watches are down on their boat. So they like to stare at their watch, they like to stare at the time, the distance, the speed that they're doing during their workouts, whereas their eyes should be looking down the course and periodically just checking instead of staying locked into that watch. Because if your head's down here, right, I can see my hand, and it feels like it's right in front of me, but if I look up, it's right here. So if you keep your head up, eyes forward, then I'll move my hand up here. It's more, at least for the top arm, more, at least for me, a mental cue. I've never done a drill for it, but keeping that head up, because if you look down, like for me, like looking down right here, it looks like my arm's high enough, but it should be up here. Yeah, driving down from here down to your catch, so this doesn't shoot up. You're at your setup, and then this, only with this top arm, it taps, or if you want to add some stability into it, you can rotate and tap the opposite side of your boat, and then go in, and then go down to your catch. And then with your exit, the way I was taught was just keep these hands in sight and keep a very, very strong catch. Yeah, the way I was taught to get my exit out early was we would start by the tapping drills. So this top arm, so I released that habit of driving this arm up or out or anywhere but here. And then a super, super strong, like loaded catch. Everything you have from your legs connected to your hips and torso, just kind of pulling through the water and not letting these arms break, and then keeping my hands in my field of view, forcing myself to exit what feels like too early, so mid-thigh right behind the knee. A couple cues you can have is doing that drill. Make sure to use, I know we always have a 2K warm-up for our practices and a 2K cool down if there's time for it, but during these I always like to have at least a kilometer of very, very focused, strict technique before I started the other kilometer of getting up to speeds and getting used to what I need to for that workout. But to ensure that you are using those times given to focus on your technique as much as you can and take advantage of that.